Hi, everyone. So we're here to talk about business fails. It's very easy to see business success. You see the big newsprint. You see lots of valuations going into things that you don't understand the metrics behind. But in order to get there, often as an entrepreneur, as someone in the industry, you have to suffer some fails. So our goal here is to sort of highlight some of the things that you might want to do differently as an entrepreneur, how to avoid some tragic mistakes that each of us has made. And we have different perspectives. I come from the entrepreneurship world, the world of pharma, but I'm really about how to accelerate companies into the cannabis space. We have with us Mike Dax, who came from MedRelief in Canada, who was sold to, which one? Something with an A. As a business success, but what happens the day after that happens. Shimi Posen, who has structured deals across Canada, seen it all. Are we measuring the size of your canopy, or how much growth you can get under a light? He knows all of those sort of metrics. He's seen what wins, what fails. And Dave Hess, a good buddy of mine from Tress Capital, partners of ours who we have seen deal flow together across the US and globally, who's seen what it takes to be a winning team. So straight up to Mike, biggest fail.
We were laughing about it before. I'm not sure that there are huge kind of personal business fails, but I think one interesting example, I was doing lots of international stuff, and really some of the things are more lost opportunity costs. I spent better part of 2 years of my life working on a German cannabis tender that continues to be delayed, and obviously, we all only have certain amounts of bandwidth in our own companies, so that's kind of one that I've seen happen, and certainly, all sorts of companies, whether it's Canadian companies focusing on the Canadian retail opportunity, which has had stumbling out of the gate, and they've been distracted from looking at global opportunities. Saul, you touched on something, I've seen many decks in this industry, and, it's funny when people have unrealistic valuations, and they try and use various benchmarks that are in fact not comparable to what they're trying to do. And frankly, I think those are the kinds of ventures that probably have unrealistic expectations and likely won't execute. And so I try to stay away from those.
So I think that there's really two components that I see as some of the biggest fails that take place. One is that no one ever listens when we advise them to get vesting schedules for founders. That essentially they believe that everybody's going to get along for the rest of the life of this venture, and when someone stops participating to the extent of some of the other founders, they all expect the same equity, and everybody gets upset and everybody fights, and then there are lots of expensive lawyers involved to try to sort it all out. The other component that I think is less often but actually does take place a lot is waiting around for the perfect valuation instead of actually starting the business and starting to build and being an entrepreneur and selling your product or building what you need to build. That I see this quite often, that people will wait around and they say, but these other 3 companies down the street got such a different valuation than me. Just take the money and start building your business. The valuation will make up itself, and you'll be able to build a successful business.
Turn it on. I would say for number one, epic fail would be for an investor to believe that they've missed the boat, that they're too late. Okay, they haven't. There's still plenty of time left. We're at the precipice of just something really, really, really great. That's number one. And number two, I would say to those looking for investment and those investors looking to invest, do your homework on one another. And make sure that this is someone that you trust, that this is someone that you want to do business with, regardless of check size, especially if it's someone that potentially could sit on your board one day. Ask yourself, and that to me also is, people say, do you bring on value-add investor? What is value-add? The first thing that comes to my mind is, is this someone I would just go ahead and ask advice of and trust their answer regardless if they're giving me $1? If you wouldn't, I would never go to that guy. Well, don't take his money, and vice versa. And unfortunately, that is an epic fail I do see or have seen over the years, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about what I do. For me, it's very important to ensure that the cannabis entrepreneur and the investor are both linked up and happy.
So we often say at iCAN, there are a lot of horses in this race, right? So how do you choose which is the best one? You base it on the jockey, right? And this isn't new to cannabis investing. This is investing 101. Make sure the team is right. Like I went through founder suffering, as we call it. Exactly as you were saying, a founder that is no longer active in my company but has a significant portion of the company. Had I known better at the time, structure it differently, but you live with the choices that you make as an entrepreneur, and I'm not a litigation type of guy. We live with the situation that there is, but that is a fail, and something that when we structure new companies coming under the iCAN umbrella, we're very careful about how much equity do you get at the beginning versus how much equity do you earn over the period of time. So, that's one of my personal fails. So let's talk about how to avoid a fail. What can the best advice you can give someone here who is starting and wants to avoid, making the mistake, which gets them to where they want to go faster and hopefully cheaper?
Listen to your professional advisors, but don't listen to them to the extent that it will kill the deal, because lawyers absolutely kill more deals than they actually manage to accomplish. But one of the points that, what David was saying in terms of knowing who you're getting into bed with, I see companies from when they are in an entrepreneur's mind until I basically take them public, and that's part of the projectile of what we do. And what a lot of people don't realize is the check that you get at the front end sometimes hurts you a lot once you're on the public market. Know the reputation of the people you're taking money from, what they're going to do to your stock once you are public. There's a lot of failures that come about that way when people don't know, and it's very attractive at the front end because those check sizes do look very appealing. But that's the idea is, do your research, do your homework, and listen to your professional advisors.
I agree. That's what we were laughing about before. Shimmy and I have both been in the business of, being legal deal facilitators as opposed to legal deal killers. And I think we've both seen, part of the art of being on the business end of law is, having the trust of whether it's the CEO or the investor group that you're giving advice to. We're all both very comfortable. They don't take our advice all the time. They often end up paying for it tenfold, whether it's in litigation or in additional legal issues that they were hoping wouldn't come up. I think other people here have touched on things that certainly aren't unique to cannabis as far as, your founding team. Certainly here in Israel, everyone knows that there's been, very aggressive and creative structuring of tech ventures over many years, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that in this industry. I think Saul's doing something very responsible in how you're suggesting that you're incentivizing your operators to stay with the business and not get to fractured cap table structures.
So people ask me all the time, why do you come to Israel so much? Why do you love CannaTech? And what is it about Israeli entrepreneurs that you like so much? And to me, for the Israelis in the room and for those who know a little bit of Hebrew, it's the chutzpah, right? It's the chutzpah. And when you hit a wall, you don't know what a wall is. You go right through it. But at the same time, we're talking about epic fails. At the same time, understand how to pivot, okay? And those who do understand how to pivot at times are typically those who succeed, at least historically, that I've seen. If you can pivot, great. Don't confuse the chutzpah and the drive and the passion, for stubbornness and not listening to advisors and to those that you trust, and most importantly, to oneself.
Especially in an environment in Israel where everyone's an entrepreneur, right? So how do you differentiate between the ones that are going to win and the ones that aren't? So the woodpeckers, the guys that are always there, they're not going away 3 months away, 6 months away. It's like the kids who are selling lemonade on the corner, right? Those are the ones you want to invest your time in. You know, we weed through a lot of cannabis companies, a lot of cannabis investors. It's very hard for us sometimes because an investor is often a company that's raising money. So it's really confusing from a entrepreneur perspective to understand who you're sitting next to in a room, and stop wasting time. Like, don't hold, I guess one of my fails early on was a lot of people on the hook isn't really people on the hook. Get a no as opposed to getting, you know, a maybe. Because at least then you can put your energy, like Mike was saying, in where you're going to get the most value as opposed to everyone who is still on the hook. So how do you get more value out of the relationships that you've created, and what's next in cannabis?
Sure. So, you know, I think everyone who's here at this great event here in Tel Aviv, and I hope everyone's having a good time who's not from here, we are creating those trusted networks here. And, you know, it's about, and I've been exposed to, you know, the people that have had early successes in Canada are now adding certainly accretive value to the strategic investments they're making going forward, and, you know, building, whether it's supply chain ecosystems or just partnerships amongst their own networks of their own investments and their group of people making similar investments and looking at similar opportunities. That's certainly a huge opportunity. I do want to mention one thing about the topic of epic business fails, and it's the concept of people in, you know, looking to invest and execute on very large infrastructure projects, whether it's cultivation, extraction, distribution, where the regulatory environment actually makes their execution of their model next to impossible. There are certainly some educated guesses and understandings about how regulation and opportunities will evolve, but there are some silly ventures out there, and I hope everyone's being careful of them.
Silly ventures, I would say there's quite a few of them. But I think, you know, reputation is a strong part, and I think that also when you're, you know, starting to explore this world, and you know, we are still quite early in the cannabis sector, but when we're trying to explore who you're dealing with and what reputation they have, I think that you could usually just tell by what they're seeking in terms of their compensation or the arrangement they want. If it's tied to performance or not, or if it's something that they'll spend more time negotiating the front-end finder's fee versus actually performing the value-added service that they're hoping to accomplish. Because most of the people that bring real value don't necessarily ask for compensation on the front end. They know they'll get compensated as they bring that value.
So you also asked what's coming next. I think as a result of all the great things and all the work everyone has put into this industry over the past, you know, several years, and really back into '96, both Israel and California, and that's really when this really got started, and some will argue even earlier. What comes now is scrutiny, okay? I think a lot of people have been building, building organizations, building companies, and for whether it's an investor or anybody else, right? If it looks good, great, I'm in, you know, how much, where do I sign? There are more serious players starting to come in. More money is being invested. With that comes reporting. And early on, especially running in a startup, a lot of friendly investors and angel investors were coming in, and a lot of companies weren't necessarily, you know, up to par. That, you know, it would be an epic fail to think that that's going to continue, right? And it's really about understanding the environment, whether it's a regulatory environment or, you know, economic environment, understanding where we at as an industry. We've matured. I think that's, you know, people who have been coming to CannaTech over the years, I think that's something I've heard echoed over the past few days. It looks like a more mature conference, a more mature industry, and it is. But with that comes responsibility.
Yeah, I agree. You know, if you look at how companies mature through investment, right? So early on, I've got a piece of paper and maybe an aerial picture taken from a drone of a piece of land that I hope to grow cannabis on. Today it's changed where I've got GMP and, also a piece of paper that I can maybe process cannabis. In my world, it's kind of weird to go to a conference and you got, say, pharma companies saying we produce our tablets in a GMP facility, right? So how do you mature beyond that? When do you change from everyone is a lifestyle brand, everyone's going to have GMP? What are the differentiators now as everyone's scaling up for international? What can we learn from, and how do we avoid spending more money in the future?
I want to pick up on one thing you mentioned. What will be the differentiators? One certainly might be a source of inputs. We were on a panel a couple days ago about LATAM versus Asia versus EU versus USA hemp. There will be differentiated markets, differentiated quality of these different products at different price points for manufacturers, and I think we're going to see a lot of differentiation, lots of luxury brands, and lots of whether it's CVS or Walmart in the US or Superfarm here. I think everyone in this room agrees that we're on a big opportunity, and it's going to take patience for those who are looking at executing in the long term, and there are obviously lots of opportunities along the way to get there.
I think that the fundamentals that are going to have to come out are going to come down to sales. Like at some point, these things are going to have to be cash flow positive and be profitable. And yes, that's going to come down to some branding and some advertisement and distribution, but the bottom line is the bottom line. They're going to have to make money.
No comment. So we're about to come into our pitch event. I want to actually thank especially Dave Hess. I've been putting on CannaTech from 2014, and we've had partners from the beginning. So we have a evolution of people who come and go through the cannabis. They want to be cannabis. I was 3 years ago I went to a meeting and someone said, "Are you cannabis? Either in the industry, or do you want to be in the industry?" I was well into the industry, so I was kind of offended, obviously. But Trust Capital has really supported us from the very, very beginning. Great capital partners in the US with a fantastic portfolio. Mike Dax in Plenar has, come in from the Latin American perspective. And Shimi, I don't know, what are we, 3 years been talking backwards and forwards on how to structure things coming out from the IP generation in Israel into the Canadian market. So, we try and bring a network of people around us that can provide you a level of information that allows you to operate quicker into cannabis and save you more money. So thanks, everyone. We're going to head to the panel. And let's, some new innovation.
All right, give it up for the panel.